What is up, my friends? Welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a look at the orchestra and we're taking a look at the violins. We're going to start right from the top. We're going to start with the strings and go all the way down, visit all the sections, and then continue on to the next sections of the orchestra. And before we really get into the violins, I want to give you my clear orchestral sound guide, which kind of goes through 10 steps that you really need to know in order to get your mock-up sounding clear and clean and full and rich. I think a lot of amateur mock-ups have some common pitfalls to them, and like in terms of balance and mixing and even arrangement and orchestration. So the goal of this guide is to kind of eliminate that, give you a sense of what to focus on, and give you a sense of where to take your next steps in order to improve your next mockup. So if you want to download that, it's totally free, and it's the first link in the box below. It'll take you straight there. So let's kind of get into the violins. This is the bread and butter section of the orchestra. And in terms of the violins themselves, they're kind of the smallest string instruments, right? So the open strings are G, D, A, and E. Do, 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 right? Because they're the smallest instruments, they're also the highest ones of the string section. So it can typically be heard above the ensemble, going with the rule that the higher a note is within an arrangement, the more easily the ear will naturally pick up on it. So that rings true for the violins. They produce a very bright, lyrical, clear, and powerful sound, right? Especially when played in sections, it can really sing out above the rest of the orchestra. If we're talking about mimicking a voice, I would say that the violins can really assume the role of the soprano, which is like the high female voice. And generally, the sound is very versatile, and the instrument can do a lot of things, a lot of different techniques, and that also rings true for the other string instruments as well. But yeah, there's just a lot of possibilities when it comes to the violins. So what are some pros and cons to using the violins? Well, first of all, they can be very expressive. I think when we think of the violin, we think of like heavy, passionate vibrato, solo instrument playing, and also ensemble playing. It sounds very lush and very full. So with the vibrato and the yearning sound, it's a very dynamic instrument as well, so it can produce a lot of expression. Also, the violin section is commonly used for soaring melodies and high textural background elements like harmonics, flotando, etc. So again, it's very versatile, but it's most commonly used, I think, for long lines where the music can really flow and it can really carry the line forward. Also, the sound is not produced by the mouth. It's being produced by the bow and them, playing back and forth. So long lines can be performed without breaking the sound. They don't need to take a breath in order to continue producing the sound, right? They can just move the bow back and forth and the sound can just keep on coming as long as they want it to. And as we talked about before, the versatility in articulation is vast, like sustain, staccato, pizzicato, tremolo, slides, etc. Like different instruments, like different sections can also play these articulations, but just within one instrument, you can do so many things, which is really cool. Now, in terms of a con, the only thing I could really think of is that they can have a tendency to be overused in many contexts, where a substitute could be better, like for example, woodwinds. Like I think the woodwinds are underappreciated, but generally the violins, I think they're just used a whole lot in terms of in any orchestral context, really. Like you mentioned orchestra to someone, they're going to think strings for the most part. So that's the only really con I can think of. It's not a very unique sound, but hey, I mean, it's popular for a reason. It sounds so good. It's such a timeless sound, right? So to finish off, let's talk about my personal favorite ways to use violins. Number one, for passionate passages, I love to layer the violins like in a lead melody with a flute or an oboe, so using woodwinds to give the overall texture, air, and balance. So we're so familiar with the violin sound, but when you add in a different texture to enhance the overall thing slightly, then it can actually give it a bit of a lift, and that's actually very nice to the ear. I typically use the violins 2 section to harmonize violins 1, especially in the DAW, right? So I'll play a violins 1 line, and then if I feel it's maybe a little too high and the violas in the next line they're a little bit too low, then I'll use the violins 2 to kind of harmonize the violins 1 and bridge the violins 1 and the violas in a way. Usually a third or sixth below in most romantic or classical contexts, because those are very resonant intervals. And also, because they're very dynamic, I enjoy using the quietest PP layers along with the FF layers for climactic moments, right? So that kind of makes sense. When you have really quiet dynamics, you want to use them, take advantage of them in your quieter sections. And then for climaxes, you want to actually use the larger dynamic layers, which is why purchasing a library that contains these dynamic layers is so crucial. Okay? And finally, as a solo instrument, I really enjoy employing rubato and vibrato at appropriate times, which allows it to mimic the human voice in an intimate manner, right? Because very rarely will a professional vocalist sing to the click, like with a metronome, and stay at the same time every time. You know, it's not going to make sense unless it's like a pop song, right? But generally, in a more romantic or classical context or film scoring context, you're not going to get you know, especially in a ballad or a slower piece of music, it's going to have some rubato. It's going to take time. It's going to push forward, and also the vibrato can be very, very expressive to mimic the human voice as well. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what the violins can do. Again, my highest recommendation is just to listen to as much violin music as you can, listen to the orchestra, hear how they sound, and you'll start getting an idea of what they can really do in context. So before you go, again, make sure to download the free 10 Steps to a Clear Orchestral Sound Guide. It'll take you through the 10 steps that I think are very crucial to know in order to make your mockups really sound great. To be honest, very clear and very open. And these are things I've learned over time, so I want to give them to you absolutely free. Again, you can click the first link in the box below to check it out, and I'll catch you in the next video tomorrow. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.